Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome each and every one of you to the Insights of Sierra Leone. I am so honored to be on this platform, and I thank you for watching, and I thank you for your ears. Thank you for your time. During this time, it's difficult time going on in Sierra Leone. The times are hard with the crisis, with the lockdown, us not being able to see our loved one, and people being aboard the perception. But before I go any further, I just want to welcome a very, 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 very close friend of mine, Mr. David Sleet. Please.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really, really glad that you've invited me to speak about perceptions. And my background, for those that don't know, is I am a qualified life coach and managing director of a psychological accreditation organisation called ANA. And I come very much from a psychological support environment. And as we talk about perceptions, that psychological support is going to be something that I suggest might come up.
Well, definitely, definitely. It's a pleasure to have you on the show with me. And the reason why I put so much emphasis on the very, 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 very close friend is because David and I have done a lot of work together, and very intelligent young man. And his input into what's going on in Sierra Leone, it's something I'm really intrigued on, because David sometimes calls me up and said, "So Unisa, what is so and so and so?" So he is, aware of a lot of things that are going on. But I wanted us today's show to look at things from a different perspective. I wanted, I did not want a Sierra Leonean. I wanted you specifically, because the perception that is going on in Sierra Leone right now is not a positive one. There's a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of miscommunications in reference to the corruption that is going on, in reference to the youths, in reference to, children trafficking. It's just a lot of mayhem going on. So I just wanted to get your feedback into what is it that you think is, what's your perspective, first of all?
I think there's a mass amount of amazing history within Sierra Leone. It has such an amazing potential, and because of various different components that have played out over the last 30-40 years, like in most places around the world, not just in the region and not just in Sierra Leone, but right across the world, things that have gone awry in how operations work, how structures work, how systems work, has all been put under a huge amount of strain. And when we present that to the world, or the world kind of peeks through the curtain and takes a look, it's almost like taking a snapshot of a movie and then making a judgment on the movie based on the photograph.
Yeah.
And that snapshot of Sierra Leone doesn't represent the movie that is behind that snapshot.
1961, to be exact, was when the British left Sierra Leone, because we were colonized by the British. And in 1962 was when the first party was formed, which was the SLPP. And during that time, Sheikh Stephen era, all of them, there was a lot going on in that time. And which indeed, they decided, well, we cannot just have one party. Two parties need to be in play. But since then, different parties have, come into the country. And it's a lot of corruption going on. I do understand the beauty that you speak of, because the Portuguese are the ones that name Sierra Leone the Lion Mountain, as you're quite aware. So when you say the beauty, because we have natural resources, we have diamond, gold, iron ore, and so forth. I can go down the list. So be more specific as to say the beauty.
Okay, so we know that the whole region is full of natural resources. We know the history of colonialism in the region. We know the horrors that were committed. But we very rarely hear about the beauty of the country in any of the regions. What we hear about is the negativity, because that's what humans do. They look at the nasty
The
stuff.
negative aspect.
They look at the negative. And if a country presents or allows that negative to be the loudest voice that is heard, and it doesn't counter that with a demonstration of the beauty, of the art, of the culture, of the classic of that country, then all of those things get lost, not just from the international perception, but from the national perception too. There is so much history of hope from Sierra Leone. Freetown was formed out of hope. That message over the last 40 years has somehow got lost from the international stage.
Absolutely.
And
So why do you think that happened, David? Just from your, the show is called, the perspectives, perceptions of Sierra Leone. Excuse me. Wow, my guest is correcting me. Well, thank you.
Not putting up with that.
So what's your perception?
I think a political void was created, and that void led to unrest. It happens, it's human, it's what happens in countries all across the world when there is that power break. For whatever the scenario that is presented to the world about what happened that caused that, that's not what the world will see. The world will see what was happened as a result of that, and they will focus on that. It's a bit like when a child has a temper tantrum. We deal with the temper tantrum, not what caused the temper tantrum. So the situation that caused that situation doesn't get dealt with, it gets repressed. And over time, that repressed situation, emotion, anger, hurt, whatever is in play, just bubbles away under the surface. And when the temper tantrum is dealt with and the chairs are reset and everyone's sat back round the table, if you don't deal with what caused the temper tantrum, it carries on festering.
Right. Well, as the whole world is quite aware, it's the people are blaming the government due to the corruption, due to the fact that it's a lot of inequality that is going on in the country, injustice. It's just a lot I can go on. The freedom of speech has been taken, which indeed is all in the Constitution. I did a whole show where I broke down the whole Constitution of Sierra Leone. So that is it. But, to resolve an issue as such, we need to understand the basis where it started from. Now, the whole thing, sad to say, started in 1962. Well, 1963 going into 1964. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I know I'm not wrong. I
would suggest what erupted in 63, 64 was, in essence, to use the same analogy, is the temper tantrum. Because all of the power and corruption and suppression that had gone on before 1961 was now able to come to the surface. And because there was that break between 1961 and 1962, when establishments started to be put back into place. All of that frustration, all of that hurt, the anger, and the pain was able to grow momentum. So it was able to kind of get to the surface and go, we don't like this, we don't like this, we don't like this.
Well, according to the history, people felt as though they were suppressed. You understand? For so many years. Now they have a party in place, a party that is supposed to say we the people, and technically SLPP, APC, they all say the same thing. Now, my thing is, the people felt this way, and the government, instead of them to say, you know what, let's sit there and look at this way and see how we can resolve it, you know, from Samuel Magai to Shekhar Stevens, moving all the way to BO. Now, really, not much has changed, and I understand where you're coming from a psychological perspective. Now, let
me ask a question.
Please.
First off, do you think nothing's changed because over those different leaders and leadership styles and systems that were put in place, what they've done is reframe the situation? So it looks different because it's got a different frame around it, but they've actually not changed the picture.
Their mentality.
Right? So the same situations, the same scenarios, just repeat and repeat and repeat. But the solutions are just reframed from what's been done before.
Right.
So we'll tweak this and we'll tweak this and we'll tweak that, but actually doesn't deal with what is wrong with the picture.
You see, the thing is that the North, the South, or whatever have you, they're fighting. And when this is happening, it's at the end of the day, it's the people that suffer. And according to the government, they always say we're here for the people. But the people are looking at us to say, you're in power right now. You don't care about us. You just care about your friends, your family, and those that give you money. Where we at? Because the people are suffering.
Yeah.
And the current government stated that they was going to give free education. Where's the free education?
And
so,
politicians worldwide,
they talk the talk, but never walk the walk.
Right? And this is the thing when you look at a perception of a country where historically there has been that reframing. New operations come in, new executive leaders come in, new kind of promises are made that aren't delivered. And, you know, I'm not politically motivated one way or the other. I don't have a view on one or the other. So I look at it from a very apolitical lens.
That's why I welcome you on the platform.
Okay. So it does, you know, the names, parties, when you look at the perception of a country, the history books don't recall those things. They recall what happened, not who or which party.
Yeah.
And when politicians hold on to the fact that the history books don't go, you know, it was this party that did this, unless there is a positive. When they do something that's really positive for a country, that's when they get their legacy attached to their party.
It's like a brand.
Right. So when it's negative, and it's negative after negative after negative after negative, none of that party affiliation makes any difference. It just shows a repeat of negative experiences for the people of a country. To change that, you have to change how you engage, one, with the people, two, with yourselves as an executive, and three, with the outside world.
Okay. Now, I'm glad you said that, because you're a businessman, I'm a businessman. I buy your company over. Okay, let's even say a merger, because a merger is coming together as one. I buy your company over, right? What you do is that you let me know, you give me a handover. Now, doing this handover, now my objective is to improve and grow. And I think that is where a lot of our leaders are going wrong. And that is why when I talk on this platform, people get upset. I'm not here because I'm your friend. I don't want to be your friend. I'm the friend of the people. Let's get that right. You don't have to like me. At the end of the day, like I always say, David, when I die alone. I'm going to my grave alone. You understand? But I want equality for my people. I want justice for my youths. I want peace in the region. You understand?
Yeah.
So if you're not doing right, it's only right that the people complain.
Yeah.
And the whole thing is that I personally feel as though the government is separating the people. And that is why so much going on. The people are too busy fighting each other while they're enjoying themselves. They're not getting injured.
As the last 200 years, you could say that about the political system in most countries. That's unfortunately the way the world has gone. It's not the way the world should be, and it's not the way the world could be. And it's about, for me, as someone who works as a psychological coach, finding the paths away from that reframing and that repetition of negative after negative after negative, and look at how do we showcase the positives here. We have an amazing history, we have an amazing culture, we have an amazing amount of talent in a country. We have seen huge amount of natural resources that the world benefits from, but we're not crediting. How can we, as a group of people, whether that's...
Why don't you do me a favor, look into that camera,
Okay.
and then and talk to them.
Okay. Sierra Leone has an amazing culture, an amazing history, an amazing amount of talent. That's all been caught up in the repetition of negativity and the trauma that has come along with the last 20 years. Huge amount of hurt and pain and grief. And anything that can undo that is not going to come in a bottle. It's not going to come in the form of medication, it's not going to come in the form of a magic wand, and it's certainly not going to come in the form of a single executive leader. No matter how good that executive leader is, they're going to need an amazing team to connect in a very different way. And for the perception of a country that has the history and the recent history that Sierra Leone has, highlighting or allowing the negative to be the dominant voice, the dominant message, is only going to repeat the negatives. You cannot ever solve a problem today with the solutions of yesterday. And if the solutions of yesterday didn't work yesterday, they're not going to work today. They're sure not going to work tomorrow either.
You know, thank you for that. The thing is, you and I always talk, and we always talk about it's not about reinventing the wheel, but modifying the wheel.
It's about making sure the suspension in that wheel
It's good.
is solid.
Exactly. So the thing is, many of the leaders from Sierra Leone, in Sierra Leone, got their education from abroad, meaning either London or America. And they watch how the system here runs. You want to tell me, as a political person, as a sensible person, as an educated person, you cannot take this information and sit down with your team and say, okay, we've seen what has occurred, just like you said. This is what we can redo it. You understand? So what's your perception of these leaders that keep being repetitive of this same strategy, this same method?
The challenge is exactly as you just laid it out, and I don't think there is a realization of that fact. The leaderships have learned from systems overseas. They've brought that learning, they've seen what's happened, the political systems in the UK, they've seen the political systems in the US, and they've tried to bring those into a country where those building blocks that the US has, the UK has, Europe has, don't exist. And if you try and bring a system into somewhere and make it fit something that it doesn't fit for, it wasn't built for, isn't designed for. It's a bit like trying to put an overcoat on without changing what you're wearing underneath it. It doesn't work if you don't change the core. And the building blocks have to be in place for those systems to work. And if you think the UK system, political system, as an example, that's had 800 years to sort itself out and find something, and it's not perfect either.
That's what I was thinking. No
system.
Thank you. So me being hard on them, it's not I'm trying to point figures, I'm trying to say this or that. It's just frustration kicks in.
Yeah. And this is a challenge for every country in the world. And the US is probably a prime example right now of what happens when frustration is allowed to build and build and build. Emotions are suppressed in a large portion of the population. And all of a sudden, somebody comes along and takes the lid off of that pressure cooker. And that frustration is allowed to come to the surface. Now you've got one group of people that have dominated the marketplace and the political conversation, facing the population that have been suppressed and had their emotions suppressed. And now you've got conflict. And Sierra Leone, as in many countries around the world, is no different. When you have that suppression of one group and a dominance of another, and the balance changes. Bringing those two entities together is not impossible. It's about listening, and it's about accepting that the history of that suppression is going to cause upset.
So, go back a little bit. Now, there's a separation within the country. Mm-hmm. Who do you think can bring that country back together? Is it the people or the government?
I think.
Or when I say the government, let me just be a little bit more specific. The president.
Okay. I don't think it is a case of one or the other. I think it is about the connection between the two. And I think whoever leads with leadership rather than boss mentality. And when you lead with...
There has to be structure.
It has to be structured, but it has to be structured so that everyone is involved in this. And when I say everyone, I don't mean the leaders of parties. I don't mean leaders of social groups. I mean everybody has to be invested in this. Because if the people make the decision that they want things to be different, they want things to change, then they have to accept a responsibility to do things differently, to accept the hard, okay, I didn't like that group, but we need to get past, I didn't like that group, just as the political parties need to. And when we look at how situations of civil unrest have come to resolution throughout history, it doesn't happen because one leader comes along, unless that leader is a dictator. And all the dictator does is reinforce the suppression on the people.
Basically, if you look down the history, some of the leaders, I'm not going to say all, majority of them, play the role of a dictator. Now, it's a tribal war that is on the verge of happening in Sierra Leone, which indeed,
and it's frightening to watch.
exactly, because once they leave Sierra Leone, I had a gentleman on my last show, which is his Creole. And there was a situation that occurred, I don't know if you've seen the show, where he gave me some money. You know, it's like, okay, I don't know, he's like, you're from Sierra Leone, I'm your brother. Like, okay. Now, if we're not in the country, we have that togetherness. Because a Jamaican person see you, they'll say, oh, you're African. You're from Sierra Leone. A Nigerian see you, oh, you're from Sierra Leone. There's no, oh, you're Creole, none of that.
Yeah.
None of that ignorance.
Once you take away that
barrier.
insular border, and you start looking, you know, it's a bit like the difference in football teams. You know, we all have our favourite football team, but when the national team plays and we take people out from each of those clubs to make up that national team, we support the national team. When we go overseas, we support the nation. But once we're on our doorstep, in our own backyard, we're back down to our individual groupings. And with a history that has got so much potential for the future, that mindset has been nurtured and nurtured and nurtured to keep people in that conflict.
Of course.
And that is the biggest waste of natural resource any country can have. Because the biggest potential and the biggest natural resource of any country is its people.
Of course. And there's a saying, divided we stand, divided we fall.
Together we stand.
Thank you. I don't know what's going on with me today. But the mere fact of the matter is that I think they're putting fear. They're putting something to keep these people separated. And which indeed is just ridiculous. Oh, these are my people now in that position, so we are going to control. Oh, wait till our people come back. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah.
And what I want these people to focus, I'll ask you the question, or I'll let you go into it. But Sierra Leone is one of the most beautiful countries. I know the continent is big, and Sierra Leone is just a portion of it. But the beauty of it, the mountains, the waterfalls, the tree, everything you can imagine, the beach, the water, the people, you will never hear a Sierra Leonean out there fighting somebody else. It's not in their culture. And they say when you're surrounded by water, you have that
there's an inner peace.
Precisely. So they have it. You understand? So a lot of people that go to Sierra Leone for holidays enjoy. You go there, you have such a good time. But we don't have the equipment. We have the tourism, department, but it's like they're not promoting the country right. So being from an outsider, and you have a little idea, so you can say something, but a lot of people are still stuck in the time of, oh, so they still live in caves? So do you guys have a lion as a pet? You understand? So perceptions are kind of...
And this is what I mean about the perception of a country. When a perception of a country is allowed to be the loudest voice, and that's negative, and a country and a people almost accept that this is the way this is, because it's gone on for so long, then there is a loss of hope, there is a loss of potential, there is a personal sense of loss. And what I think the greatest potential for any executive of any colour, of any creed, of any grouping, is to harness what is the positive message? What are the things to highlight? Change the narrative that goes out as the perception of the country and showcase that amazing culture, that history, the tourism, the landscape. Because when you have an alternative message to the negative one, people will lean towards the positive.
Of course.
Because they want to see that change.
You know, Sierra Leone, I cannot say much on it, but now, if you go, I left Sierra Leone when I was young, and I went back after 30 years or so. And when I went, I was disappointed at what I'd seen because I was sincerely expecting a change. You understand? Now, the thing is that you and I, you know me and my youths then, and I seen so many of the youths in the streets begging. Little girls, instead of going to school, they are walking down the street with their grandmother who's blind, begging for money without shoes. We are not putting these kids in school to further their education. You understand? So, from a psychological perspective, because I don't want to say these kids are broken. I don't want to use such a terminology.
Kids aren't broken.
You understand?
Kids are not broken.
But they're in so much pain, so much hurt. You can see it in their faces. So much anger. What can you say to a child who you know is fighting for betterment but cannot see a way out?
Okay, and that is tough. It's a tough scenario for any adult in any country when they see a child in that pain, that hurt, and that sense that it doesn't matter what they do because the system around them doesn't care, doesn't engage, whatever it might be. But what you can give a child is a sense that what is happening around them, one, is not their fault. What has happened is not their fault. And taking that sense of this is because of me, or this is my fault, or this is because of who my parents were, that all of these things are going wrong. You take that away from a child and you take away their biggest suppression factor, which is their own sense of self-belief. You give that back to a child that they can achieve, no matter what the system is around them. They are learning things whether they are in school or not, but they don't know that they're learning things because there's nobody there to show them that they are learning. You give them a sense of hope by going, you might not have been at school, you might not have done exams, you might not be going to university, but that doesn't mean that you can't contribute to the world around you. If you are caring for an older relative, in the example that you just gave, you're learning so much about caring for a relative. You are learning about what that older person needs as they age. They are skill sets that will set you up for life. And the change comes from within you, not from the world around you. The world around you will change because of how you change towards it. And if you lay down and accept the world is the way it is and it's all dark and it's all horrible, guess what? It stays dark and it stays horrible. And you can't ever break that. So for those adults that want to make change, that want to drive change, go out, find those young people and let them know that they are learning skills that are going to be needed. Those businesses that need people to showcase those skill sets, go out, get them, they're there.
You know, I have to, It's saddening, David. They have churches that are not getting paid. So the churches are not giving them their all. But they have some good churches that are still giving themselves to the commitment, staying loyal. You understand? But again, they're not getting paid. Majority of the children can't afford the books. Majority of the children can afford the uniform.
You know, I hear the scenarios about governments not paying state employees.
Over there, it's like the UK, you get paid on a monthly. Doctors, teachers, they're not getting paid. Government officials, oh, they make sure they get their money
Yeah, but
without no ifs and buts about it,
yeah,
or maybes.
and this is where that disparatory situation beds in. It becomes, this is the normal. This is where the hope of those professionals who want to give their all for the betterment of others and the care of others start to give up. And when a state apparatus allows that to take place, we know what happens. We know what that degradation does. But this isn't a Sierra Leonean issue. This is a political power issue. When people want to hold on to something and they want to put things in place to maintain that, everything else gets pushed away. And as you rightly said, the history says there have been leaders that have acted as dictators without changing the system to switch over to dictatorship. They've acted in that way. They haven't lasted very long in some cases, but they've come with that mindset. Because a country's political system will always adapt to the situation that the country is in. And if a leader comes along that uncaps that frustration in an audience, then that leader will be followed by that audience.
Of course.
We've just seen what happens stateside,
Of course.
right? So to do the flip of that is not to repeat the same mindset. The mindset must be different. The approach must be different. The engagement must be different. And when any executive can come onto the stage and say, here is a structure where all of these things are now going to be connected. We're going to have a different way of working.
You know what I want, David?
I'm not standing.
I want a political leader that is standing for presidency to come. And I will welcome them on this platform. I want them to come with a strategy. I want them to come with a plan. I want to see a team. You understand? Because a lot of these people that say they're going for the presidency, they can sweet talk your shirt off you. They can even make you cut your hair off. You know, because they sweet talk people. And that's what political leaders do. That's what politicians do in general.
Yeah.
So, me, I'm tired of the talk.
I think
We are not moving forward.
and I think a lot of people in all of the communities would say that they're tired of that too. They've heard it all before. They've heard great plans. They've heard the great ideas. But I find it hard to see how the words themselves are ever going to get through to the people. And I think if somebody comes to the table with a plan, with a structure that's connected, and that's the key, ideas that connect operations together, that link things, that makes more sense. and because people don't use a state service and not use another state service. Invariably, education, care, justice, they're all linked.
Of course.
But so far, my perception for a lot of countries around the world is that each of those different areas of state have been contained within themselves, and they operate in silos, and they don't interconnect and they don't interlink. And I think that is a crucial explanation as to why some of the things that have gone on in Sierra Leone may have been in play.
I can sit here and then I can explain to you about the governance, the security, and so forth. But again, it's all part of the team. And you talk about interconnecting and so forth. I think they are. I think it's just fear out of many that refuse to speak up. But I think they are connected.
Oh, they're connected.
I know as a system.
Yeah.
Right. But the thing is that people are afraid to speak up. And the perception from the people is that, oh, it's us against them. You understand?
And that survival mode has kicked in for now probably close to 2 decades.
You know, it's just sad, David, and I know you and I would be supposed to be talking because I had a whole different mindset of questions for you. But again, it's just, I do enjoy this conversation, and I know we went in too deep into it, but you know, I thank you for your insights. You know,
I hope that kind of allowing that to come across, to be able to kind of go, there are ways forward. This isn't, the way things have been is not the way things need to be. It's about having the confidence, not just as political leaders, because I'm totally apolitical. I don't have a view one way or the other. It's about what the output is. What is the ethos? What is the psychological approach of that political target? And then the team around it. And if there isn't a team around it that actually follows the same ethos, it will always fail. And it's that self-interest that I think has been allowed to bed into the system that allows those things like corruption, allows those silo mentalities to get stuck because people aren't comfortable with speaking out.
Please drop in to the chat box, you know, if you have questions, comments, something you want us to look into, we'll be more than happy to do that. As usual, you know, your input is deeply appreciated. This is a conversation that I love having with you guys, and you know, I chat with you after the show and so forth. And having David here today was really a pleasure because he and I have had so many different conversations in reference to Sierra Leone, and his input is deeply appreciated. But next week's show, David, we have done research, which indeed I want everyone to have a pen then, because it's going to be a numbers game.
Okay.
You know, we have did some analysis. We have analyzed the whole system. We've done the research from Forbes magazine, everything from Ibrahim's index. We went in and got enough information, and I want each of you to be the judge. We are only here to give you our insights, our input, you know, and I think we need to find a way to grow as we are the people. We form the government. It's us. Now, I also stated on the show prior, I do understand the fact that we the people don't decide on who we want. The government dictates to us delegates to say, okay, you can either vote for this person or that person. And they say your voice matter. Your voice make a difference. Your voice don't make a difference. What's your take on that as we come to an end?
Democracy is a fickle mistress by any stretch of the imagination. But democracy is a game of power sharing. It's not about control. And the relationship between political entities and people dictate how the people engage with that democracy. Since time immemorial, since the very first democracies were formed, however you believe democracies were formed, they were never ever successful based on you have this choice or this choice and we are telling you that that is your choice. What we've seen in the Middle East with democracy at the end of a gun isn't democracy. Telling people that they have to be democratic because they've been bombed into submission isn't democracy. And Sierra Leone has a huge opportunity in the years ahead on the back of COVID to really showcase the talent and the potential of the country. But it has to embrace the confidence to be able to do that. And that means listening to some hard conversations about the things that have gone wrong. There will be things that we don't like, and there will be people that we've not wanted to work with. But we can either keep going on that merry-go-round, or we can get off and we can go and play in a different way. And I suggest now is the time for that process to start. And I hope that that's what comes to be.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I want to thank David Sleet for being on the show with me. I want to thank you all for watching as we come to an end. I just want to say I hope we find a solution, a way to move forward. The way that the country is going, we're not moving forward. It's a matter of we're moving back, or we take 2 steps forward and we take 8 steps backwards. It's ridiculous. Let's educate our children. Political leaders or non-political leaders, we producing. You have children. You want your children to be leaders. I know a lot of the political leaders, they send their children abroad to learn. But let's be intelligent. Let's look aboard. This little child that you're walking past, you don't know what that child's future would be tomorrow. Let's team up, make a difference. I believe in my youth. That's why I invest the way I invest in the country. And I want you all to know that they say it's hard to open up a business in Sierra Leone. It is. But you know what? I have family members that have opened up schools in Sierra Leone.
Nelson Mandela said, everything is impossible until it's done.
And there's nothing that is impossible.
Because if you can believe it,
you can achieve it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I bid you all a good night. Thank you for watching. May God bless you, be with you, and protect you and your family. And let's keep hoping, being optimistic for a change. Good night.